Grandpa says he has something to tell you.
During the funeral of my husband, who had taken his own life, my 4-year-old granddaughter pointed at his portrait and shouted those words. Startled, I grasped her hand and tried to take her to a waiting room. Immediately, my son-in-law stopped me.
The service is starting. We can talk later.
Knowing about my granddaughter's mysterious power, he looked pale. I bit my lip and stared at my husband's portrait. You have something to tell me, don't you? At that moment, I decided to uncover the truth, clenching my fist with resolve. I'm Helen, a 63-year-old housewife. I've been married to William, who is older than me and a company president, for 25 years. He's kind and considerate, and we've enjoyed peaceful days together. Thanks to him, I've been able to recover from days of sorrow. Interestingly, we both remarried. We both lost our previous spouses to illness and carried the weight of sadness while raising children alone. At that time, my daughter Amy was 10 years old, and Oscar, my husband's son, was 3 years old. My husband and I met through work, and our similar circumstances led us to naturally become close. Since Oscar was still very young, he didn't seem to understand that he had lost his biological mother or that he wasn't biologically related to me. After we got married, he quickly bonded with my daughter and they lived together as if they were real siblings. We were a happy and joyful family, but everything changed when Oscar entered junior high school. Up until then, Oscar had grown up believing that I was his biological mother. However, he learned the truth from a tactless relative.
So you were pretending to be my mother, even though you're just a stranger?
I didn't mean for it to be like that. I was going to tell you when you got older, and I've always cared deeply about you.
They're just words. You're just a liar.
After that, Oscar continued to rebel against me and went through a rough period. However, he finally settled down around the time he graduated from university and joined my husband's company. It seemed that being told by my husband that he would groom him as his successor gave him encouragement.
Mom, I was wrong. I'm going to turn over a new leaf and do my best from now on.
I still remember feeling relieved as I watched my son say this with shining eyes. Meanwhile, Amy, who had started working at my husband's company earlier, married her colleague John. He is a smart and capable person who excels at his job. Both my husband and I felt reassured knowing our daughter was in good hands with John. Shortly after, Amy became pregnant, and we eagerly awaited the birth of our grandchild. However, an unexpected tragedy struck our family. Amy passed away due to complications from a difficult childbirth, succumbing to severe bleeding. Her last words, almost like a whisper, were, "Please take care of the baby." Oh no. Amy. I couldn't accept the fact my daughter passed away and was frozen in disbelief. During that difficult time, my son Oscar gently comforted me.
Mom, stay strong. I'm here for you.
I wanted to be by the side of the child my daughter had brought into the world, but my son-in-law insisted on raising the child by himself. Raising a child on your own is tough. Besides, you have a job. Can't we at least help out while the baby is still little?
Thank you. But Amy took my hand and asked me to take care of the baby. I'll do my best.
But I suggested it with good intentions, but John firmly refused my help. Unable to insist against his decision, I chose to silently watch over them. My granddaughter was named Olivia and she grew up lively and healthy, despite my worries, reaching the age of 4. She was an adorable child who resembled Amy. Around that time, John started occasionally leaving Olivia with us. He didn't stay with us often, citing his busy schedule, but we were always happy to see our granddaughter whenever we could. Sometimes when John came to pick Olivia up, I could smell alcohol on him, but I assumed he had social obligations. My husband and I were too focused on our granddaughter to worry much about it. Olivia is growing up so pure and sweet.
It's like young Amy has come back to us. She's adorable.
My husband adored our granddaughter so much that he cherished every moment with her, playing hide and seek and tag. The sorrow of losing Amy never faded, no matter how much time passed, but spending time with Olivia helped heal that pain. However, something happened that would plunge me back into the depths of despair. That morning, while getting ready for work, my husband made an unusual request for dinner.
I'd love some fried chicken tonight. You make it so delicious.
Oh, thank you. With such praise, I'll have to put extra effort into it. Look forward to it.
Great, I'm counting on you. Well, I'm off.
Take care. Have a good day. Little did I realize that such a trivial conversation would be our last. Later in the afternoon, as I was preparing to go grocery shopping for dinner, my son-in-law called.
Please stay calm and listen.
What? What's wrong?
Your husband has passed away.
What? My husband suddenly passed away. He fell from the rooftop of a newly completed 5-story apartment building constructed by his company. My son-in-law John was the first to discover him. Apparently, just before the incident, my husband had sent a text to John.
He texted me saying, "There's something I'm concerned about in the new apartment. Can you come and check?" So I went, and that's when I found your husband lying there, bleeding from his head.
Oh no.
I called an ambulance, but it was too late.
I rushed to the hospital by taxi, but instead of being guided to a hospital room, I was directed to the morgue. I desperately called out to my husband, who was cold and covered in a white sheet. "Please. Open your eyes." Feeling lost and in tears, Oscar, who arrived later, held me tightly in his arms.
Dad, if you had any worries, you should have talked to us. It's not good to keep things to yourself.
What? According to the police investigation, his shoes were found neatly arranged on the rooftop, and statements from those involved revealed that my husband had been troubled. It was concluded that he had taken his own life. However, there were no signs of such behavior from my husband, and I can't imagine him leaving me and taking his own life like that. I thought we trusted each other and shared everything. Was that just my belief? Left on the brink of despair, with no energy to even prepare for the funeral, I was grateful that Oscar and John stepped in and took care of everything. And then, on the day of the funeral, since there was some time before the service began, Oscar was greeting business associates near the entrance. I was sitting with John and our granddaughter in the family section, but Olivia, who had been glancing at her grandfather's photo, suddenly stood up and exclaimed,
Grandpa says he has something to tell Grandma.
At that moment, I was taken aback. In fact, my granddaughter had a mysterious ability. I first noticed it when she was 2 years old. When we took her to visit Amy's grave, she exclaimed, "Mommy," and started chatting as if she could see her mother right there. Moreover, The details my granddaughter mentioned were things she couldn't possibly have known, so both my husband and son-in-law got shocked. When she was 3 years old, something similar happened.
The old lady next door is saying to help the dog.
Olivia suddenly said this. The elderly woman she mentioned had passed away a week earlier. So I found it strange, but I decided to check her house, and found a dog chained up and had been barely moving inside its doghouse. It seemed that my granddaughter had the ability to communicate with the deceased. However, John denied it.
It's just a series of coincidences. Olivia simply enjoys her imagination. Please don't mention this to anyone else.
Of course, I had no intention of sharing this with anyone, but I strongly believed in Olivia's abilities. I'm sure Olivia can see my husband. I thought to myself, unable to sit still. I took her hand to take her to a quiet room where we could talk more. However, my son-in-law stopped me firmly.
It's before the funeral. We can talk later.
He usually was gentle, but now he had a stern expression and looked pale. John tried to take Olivia to his side, but she resisted and didn't leave my side. Holding Olivia's hand, I gazed at my husband's photo and spoke to him in my mind. You have something to tell me, don't you? That's right. He couldn't have taken his own life. My husband left for work with his usual gentle smile, even making a dinner request. There was no suicide note and it didn't make any sense he's gone like that. As I pondered these thoughts, Oscar, who had been greeting attendees, approached the family seats. However, my attention was fixed on John, who seemed tense at that moment. Just then, Oscar called out to John, and the two went outside to smoke. Seeing an opportunity, I took Olivia to the waiting room and finally had a chance to hear her out. The words that came from my granddaughter's mouth were not something a 4-year-old would say, and it was clear that my husband was communicating to me through her. Moreover, it was unbelievably horrifying. I can't believe he's... I was shocked to my core, but Olivia continued with even more astonishing words.
Grandma, you're being targeted too. Grandpa says you need to run away quickly.
Upon hearing this, a chilling tremor ran through my entire body, prompting me to quickly seek refuge with the police. However, upon further reflection, I realized there was no evidence to support Olivia's story. I believe in my granddaughter's mysterious abilities, but I don't think the police would take it seriously. Besides, it would be troublesome if negative rumors about Olivia spread. However, I cannot let the person who harmed my husband get away with it. I will never forgive them. With determination, I returned to the venue. After that, many people who had connections with my husband gathered at the funeral to pay their respects. Then, during the time for the eulogy, Oscar stood before everyone, tears streaming down his face.
My father was a kind and reliable business leader. It's heartbreaking to see him gone like this. I wish I had noticed his struggles sooner. Dad, I'm sorry. I'll take care of the company from now on.
Oscar struggled to speak through sobs, and the sound of weeping from attendees began to fill the room. At that moment, I made up my mind and stood up, and asked the host for the microphone. Thank you all for taking the time to come here today for my husband. He's saying he has something to tell everyone, so I will speak on his behalf.
Hey, Mom. What's going on? Are you okay?
My son-in-law stared at Oscar with a fearful expression as he spoke to me in concern. As Olivia ran over to me and held my hand, The attendees began murmuring, "Speak on behalf of the deceased president? Is she delusional?" I raised my voice loudly to cut through the commotion in the room. My husband did not take his own life. He was pushed from the rooftop of the apartment building by someone. The shocking words that came out of my mouth instantly froze everyone in the room. "It was you," I shouted, pointing at the person. It was Oscar.
What are you talking about?
Amidst the chaos of the bewildered attendees, my son's calm expression suddenly turned into the face of a villain.
Are you trying to frame me?
Oscar continued to shout afterward, claiming that because I was his stepmother, my aim was to secure the inheritance for Olivia, who is my daughter's child. Upon hearing this, the attendees collectively looked at me with disapproval.
That's terrible. Just because there's no blood relation, accusing him like that.
Whispered voices murmured around me. Feeling that everyone in the room was on his side, Oscar smirked and continued to press me further.
The police concluded that Dad was tormented and took his own life. I'm innocent.
There was no evidence that my husband was tormented. You were the only one who testified that to the police.
Dad told me so. He said he couldn't bear to live anymore. He spoke his mind only to me. And his shoes were neatly lined up on the rooftop.
Oscar's face turned bright red, his eyes widened, and he raised his voice angrily, spitting as he spoke. I know the reason he took off his shoes on the rooftop. He told me about it.
What? What do you mean?
Then, I began to recount the circumstances my husband died, which I had heard from Olivia. It was my son who had invited my husband out to see the completed apartment that day.
Thanks to you, Dad, I've grown up. Let's wrestle like we used to.
When they got to the rooftop, he took off his shoes and encouraged my husband to do the same. At first, my husband was bewildered by the sudden invitation, but he fondly remembered playing like that with his son when he was a child and agreed to join Oscar. Later, after pushing my husband off the rooftop, Oscar arranged his shoes neatly to make it appear as though my husband had jumped on his own. After confirming that his father had stopped breathing, my son sent a text from my husband's phone to John saying, "Come to the new apartment right away." Upon hearing my account, Oscar turned pale, and his lips trembled.
Why would you know about that? Only Dad should have known.
My husband is here, and he's angry at you. You're coming after me next, aren't you? As Oscar realized I knew everything, sweat poured from his forehead.
Dad, are you really here? But I had no choice. Because it's his fault.
Resigned to his fate, my son began to confess everything that had happened. In truth, my husband had assessed that Oscar lacked the capability to run the business. He had informed both John and Oscar that he intended John to be his successor, with Oscar placed under him. However, unable to accept this decision, my son had plotted and carried out a plan to eliminate both my husband and me. Amy and I both thought of you as a true family, so this is really disappointing. I've recorded everything you just said, so I'm going to submit it to the police as evidence.
What? I'm not letting you do that.
Enraged, Oscar tried to strike me, but immediately after, it was my son who screamed in pain.
Ow! Let go of me.
It was John who had twisted his arm and stopped him.
He told me that he was entrusting me with the company and his son. I was planning to pass the presidency to Oscar once he grew into the role of CEO.
Despite saying that, My son-in-law seemed wary of Oscar. He sensed something amiss in Oscar's actions and behavior, suspecting that he might be up to something nefarious. Upon hearing Olivia's words at the funeral, John realized his suspicions might be true. John had tensed up at that time for that very reason.
Hand over the presidency. Don't lie. You're planning to take over both the company and the inheritance. Everyone wants money, right?
Someone among the attendees must have called the police, as they entered the venue at that moment. Suddenly, Oscar's eyes welled up with tears, and he clung to me.
Please, help me. We're family, right?
What? How can you even say that? Besides, I'm cutting all ties with you. Whatever happens to you is no longer my concern.
Hey! Don't be so cold. Please. Just don't let the police take me.
Make sure you pay for your crimes. As I spoke these words coldly, Oscar seemed to realize that nothing he said would change my mind. He collapsed to his knees. Afterwards, he was found guilty and sent behind bars. By taking my husband's life, he forfeited any rights to inherit the company or its assets. There was no one among the relatives to support him. Even if he were to return to the outside world, he would live a tough life. Meanwhile, I am now living with my granddaughter and son-in-law. Thanks to the adorable Olivia, who is growing up healthy, I am slowly regaining my spirits. Today, I placed freshly made fried chicken, which my husband loved, in front of his photograph, and talked to him. Thank you. I'm doing well.